I just wish that I had been kinder to myself, given myself more grace, and not been so hard on myself. I'm almost like stuck, like a little like beetle on my back. Almost scared to talk about, a bit of like guilt and shame around it. I actually think that we as a society need to have a change in attitude towards motherhood. Often giving up dedicating your energy towards your usual like career or like productivity or self-care, and you're directing it towards growing another human being and taking care of another human being. They had all talked about, oh, the joy, it's so happy, like it's like enjoy every moment of it. And I'm like, okay. I guess because I'm used to deriving a lot of purpose from the things that I'm doing. And I remember literally sobbing out loud. So I am a couple of days away from being full term of the pregnancy, which is kind of crazy. It's been a roller coaster of a journey on all levels, emotional, psychological, spiritual, physical. And so while I'm still pregnant and a couple of days to weeks away from meeting our baby, I thought I would film this video sharing some honest, raw reflections of what it's been like to be pregnant, and also this concept called matrescence, which I have been getting to know over the course of the pregnancy and trying to understand this transition from being just me, a young woman, just me, to now becoming a mum, which has actually been a much deeper, more profound journey than I thought it would have been. And I think it interacts a lot with how we as a society view and value motherhood. Really, I'm making this for anyone who's kind of curious about what this experience has been like so far. And I'm still working out how I actually feel about it, but there is a real interesting position that motherhood holds in modern society around motherhood, around matrescence, identity, productivity, career. What is the purpose of our lives? What does it mean to sacrifice yourself for somebody else, or sacrifice your own goals for somebody else? Is that something that we should uphold and encourage, or is that something that we should discourage? And so I've been thinking a lot about these questions, so I'll touch on some of my work in progress thoughts along the way as I film this video. So let's rewind a little bit, and this is a picture of me on the day when I found out that I was pregnant. And so let's dive into a little bit of my reflections around the whole experience so far, and yeah, just checking in on how it's going really. So I am currently 36 weeks and 6 days pregnant, so nearly at full term. Full term for pregnancy, if you're not familiar, is usually considered at 37 weeks. The baby is like ready to be born, but the due date itself is usually set at 40 weeks. I wanted to make this video because there are so many things along each stage of the pregnancy that really challenged me deeply in terms of my identity and how I am thinking of my role stepping into motherhood, how I'm thinking about my productivity, my career, the physical symptoms that were going on, the psychological impact of being pregnant, and also the whole spiritual side of trying to connect to myself and also our baby. My initial reaction to getting pregnant, I actually feel a little bit of almost scared to talk about, a bit of like guilt and shame around it, because I don't think I was expecting to get pregnant so quickly. We have a couple of friends who are struggling with their fertility, they are going through IVF, or they just haven't been able to get pregnant for over a year of trying. And so we kind of thought after we got married, like, oh, it seems like this is something that, according to various sources online, takes on average about 6 months to a year to get pregnant. And so we're like, okay, you know what? We both want to have kids. We don't know what the status of like the whole fertility thing is. Even friends who seem perfectly healthy, they are struggling in this domain. And I can see the challenge that they're facing, the difficulty and like the pain and the grief around that. And so we thought, okay, you know what? This seems to be the kind of thing where it is not actually as easy as they make it sound at school in sex ed, where they're like, oh, don't even look at a boy, otherwise you're gonna get pregnant. It seems to be actually harder than that. And so we're like, okay, if we just let nature take its course, see what happens, and maybe in a couple of months' time, maybe we'll get pregnant. But we weren't expecting it to happen straight away at all. And so then when I found out that I had basically immediately got pregnant, there were all these feelings of shock and almost a sense of grief suddenly that I was feeling, which was very strange because it seems like normal to feel grief around not being able to have a child or not being able to get pregnant, but to feel grief around getting pregnant when we were aligned on wanting kids at some point seemed quite weird, and so I felt bad about that reaction. I guess if I had known that it would pan out that way, I probably would have made slightly different choices, and in an ideal world waited waited a couple of more months, just so that we had time to like settle into married life a little bit more, do a little bit of traveling before then finally settling down for baby. And so at the time I almost felt some level of sadness around this imagined future of having a few months traveling, settling into married life before eventually finding out that we're pregnant. That would have been my ideal, and it didn't pan out that way, and there was a sense of grief around that. And also when I was thinking about it more, it wasn't just around the timing. I think that the process of moving from being just me and my husband Ali to the idea of, okay, now it's going to be 3 of us soon, there is this inherent sense of a loss of just being you two, and then this whole new family dynamic that's arising. And so there is almost this like closing of a chapter, closing of a season, and opening of a new one. And I'm very, very excited for the new one, and I feel so happy now that it has happened this way. I think it was just at the time there was a lot of processing to go through around this closing of the chapter, because I wasn't quite ready for it to close. So this is my pregnancy journal, which I've been using to kind of log how I've been feeling and any symptoms I've been having. So I'll just be kind of looking at some of these notes in here. And so let's go trimester by trimester. So the first trimester, which is basically the first 3 months of the pregnancy, are usually when a lot of women have nausea and vomiting and feel kind of ill, but nothing's really changing. And I really had that experience where once we found out I was pregnant, we were like, okay, we gotta settle down. We can't do this digital nomad thing anymore. Let's just pick a place. So we decided to move to Hong Kong. And so we came to Hong Kong, and I remember in the first hotel where we were staying, I would just like be throwing up so much in the toilet, feeling nauseous. Again, for like we got an Airbnb for like a month to settle in a bit, and then also look for places to rent longer term. And I just remember spending so much time with like the toilet basically, where I would lay in bed feeling exhausted, like absolutely like bone achingly tired and nauseous and throwing up. And I think it really had a deep impact on my relationship with productivity, because suddenly I was in this position where I couldn't rest, I couldn't nourish my body, I was literally losing weight, I was exhausted, and nothing really seemed to be changing in my body except for maybe I looked a little bit bloated, but it wasn't obvious that I was pregnant. And then I was just suddenly faced with not being able to do anything. And there was so much productivity guilt that came along with this, because I felt like, oh, I look normal, everything looks like it should be normal, but I am just chronically ill basically, because I was just taken out of action for like a month or two in the first trimester. This was also quite difficult because we were moving to a new place, and so we didn't have a setup for home cooked meals, so we were eating out or eating takeaway. And there's something about just living off takeaway that it's just so greasy and heavy, and after a while I just really was craving some home cooked food. So actually my mum came to visit to support. I remember she would cook these lovely chicken noodle soups for me, or like pork noodle soup, and I would sometimes eat the delicious bowl of soup she'd had and then suddenly get a wave of nausea and then just throw up all of this amazing lovely noodle soup that she had made for me. And I remember feeling so bad, and she would be very sweet about it. She'd be like, oh, don't worry, just like keep trying to nourish your body, keep eating, and she would make me more soup. It was just a very weird time, because I think it's almost like if I had a big belly at this point and I was having all these symptoms, it would have been almost easier to forgive myself for how unproductive and weak and ill that I felt. But in retrospect, I'm kind of realizing, you know what, even though on the surface I couldn't really see that many physical changes, all of those symptoms of nausea, vomiting, exhaustion, they were there because there were actually major changes going on in my body at the time. The placenta was growing, the baby was getting established, all my hormone levels were changing massively by like 100-200x for some of these different hormones that changed through pregnancy. And my body was adapting to suddenly being in a position of actually taking care and incubating this little being, this new life. And so now I look back, I feel like a lot of sadness that I was so hard on myself, because I didn't need to be so hard on myself. I think often I have this realization whenever I'm hard on myself, I look back, and with hindsight and 2020 vision and all that kind of stuff, I realize, you know, I was actually doing a great job. I was doing the best that I could at the time. I think there were times as well that I felt really depressed in the first trimester, because I felt a sudden crisis of purpose, where I was suddenly like, what is the point of me existing if I'm just going to be ill all the time? And I know this sounds melodramatic, and I think it was sort of through a pregnancy hormone clouded haze where I was suddenly feeling extreme mood swings, and especially extremely like negative mood swings, which is a little bit unusual for me. I remember even leaving my bed felt difficult some days during the first trimester, where I'd just lay there feeling so ill and so exhausted and so down and like just a low mood. And at this point I do remember talking to Ali, talking to my mum about these feelings and feeling like there was not really much point to my day to day. I guess because I'm used to deriving a lot of purpose from the things that I'm doing. So whether that's work, either as a doctor or creating videos or doing stuff, creating things, connecting with people, going out and about, taking care of my body and well-being, working on my relationships, I get a lot of meaning and directionality, a feeling of progress out of that. And suddenly when I felt unable to do any of these things, that was all negated, that was taken away. And there was this void of, what am I? What is the point of me if I can't do any of these things that I want to do or care about? And I think it gave me a huge sense of empathy and respect firstly for mothers generally, because many women experience really, really debilitating symptoms in pregnancy. Not all, but many. And then also a huge amount of empathy and compassion for anyone who's struggled with some kind of chronic illness or chronic fatigue or being unwell for a long time. When I would be in those periods of like wondering, what is the point? Ali and my mum would sort of say, well, like, what could be more purposeful than literally growing a new being, a new human? The problem for me was being a first-time mum, it felt very abstract. At the time, it didn't really feel like there was anything actually going on. I didn't really have the sense of, okay, there is actually a being growing and she will become a whole human and she will become her own person. And for me as her mum, my body, my womb is literally the place that is supplying this life force to her to always kickstart her life, to give her that like initial burst of life force energy that she needs to then make it out into the real world and step into becoming a new human and a whole person. So I would say that for me, the first trimester was by far the hardest, and mostly because of all of these emotional, psychological, spiritual like crisis of purpose, feeling like, oh, what's the point? Feeling so ill, losing weight, losing strength. I remember I couldn't do yoga or exercise. So usually I do yoga almost every day, and I would go to the gym regularly as well. I suddenly couldn't do any of that because I just felt sick at the thought of moving. And so I lost so much strength in those first 3 months. On top of that, the whole upheaval of moving to Hong Kong, which in retrospect, it was actually very brave to do during the first trimester. At the time, I didn't realize that the first trimester would really definitely be the worst. A lot of people say that the first trimester and the third trimester are the hardest, and the second trimester is a little bit more chill, but I didn't know that actually for me the first trimester would really be the hardest. So some of the issues that we had moving to Hong Kong were firstly having to live off takeaway. Secondly, when we actually moved into our more long-term flat, they were meant to have checked that the appliances were clean and in good working order, but I think they probably forgot because the whole kitchen, all of the kitchen appliances were broken. A bunch of the air cons were like not cleaned and filthy, full of like algae and mold and bacteria. And it was mainly the kitchen that was the issue, because we still couldn't cook home cooked meals because there was literally no ventilation in the kitchen because the fans were all broken. There was no oven, there was no dishwasher, washing machine didn't work at all. Like, everything was broken. Essentially everything except for the fridges were broken. And so it's like, okay, we can live off takeaway again. And so we lived off takeaway for another month, which was actually really horrible. And so I guess a lot of lessons there were that, especially moving to a new country, it's really important to make sure that the living standards are reasonable, because I've never dealt with moving into a place where they literally just give you all these broken things and think it's fine. And I'm like, what? So if you're ever moving to Hong Kong or even any other country, just really think about, okay, checking that everything's working. I think for me, because I was so exhausted, I just didn't have the energy to even check. And I was just like, okay, surely it's fine. I'm just gonna trust them that it's fine. It wasn't. Then the second trimester arrived, and finally, the nausea and vomiting went away and I started to feel good again. I had to rise my energy levels. I didn't feel exhausted anymore. I think at this point, the placenta and all the key structures and all the hormone changes had started to stabilize. And so then my body was like, okay, kind of used to the new normal. Initially, my body and belly just didn't really look like anything had changed still. It was like maybe I looked a little bit bloated, but otherwise I could kind of pass as not particularly pregnant. But then by by the end of the second trimester, my belly had popped out and was starting to feel kind of big. I could feel the stretching in my abdominal muscles as well. I guess because it's never been stretched in that way before, but I could feel the almost like the diastasis of my six-pack muscles. I could feel the like sharp pain occasionally of this stretching out. And during the second trimester was also the first time that I actually felt baby kicking. And so I felt her starting to kind of flutter about a little bit. We had all the blood tests and also the scans and found out that we were having a baby girl, which I was very, very happy about. And then sometime during the second trimester, I had a mini coaching call with Tara Howley, who does a lot of this sort of emotional coaching work. And she asked me what was feeling alive for me right now. And immediately this whole pregnancy thing came up as something that feels like there's a lot of emotion to unpick around it. And I think during the course of the coaching session, I basically realized that I felt this feeling of weird grief around the closing of the chapter of my previous life. And she framed it almost in terms of archetypes. So she suggested this idea of like there's the Maiden archetype, and now I'm moving into the mother archetype, where for the Maiden archetype, it's like, oh, you're a young woman, you're free, your like center of your world is yourself, and working on yourself, having fun, having experiences, building yourself up, meeting new people, that kind of thing. But then in the mother archetype, you transition to this center of gravity of your world, no longer just being in you. There's almost this external locus or external nexus of the center of your world, which becomes your family, becomes your children, your family, your partner. And when she talked about that, it just felt so resonant. And I literally I cried and cried and cried during that coaching session, because no one had told me that I would feel any sense of sadness in my pregnancy. They had all talked about, oh, the joy, it's so happy, it's like enjoy every moment of it. And I'm like, okay. Firstly, every moment is sometimes really hard to enjoy. It's really freaking hard to enjoy when your head is in a toilet for the whole day and you're literally vomiting bile. But on another level as well, there's obviously the joy of feeling baby kicking. She's actually kicking right now, and feeling the excitement around your growing family. But I actually don't think it's helpful to think of the joy as excluding any sense of sadness, because both feelings can exist at once, the joy and the sadness, the excitement and also the grief as well. And it's almost like in this period of transition where one chapter is winding down, of course there's grief around that, because it was good. It was a good season of life, and I'm so grateful for that. And then also there is this winding up, this arising of this new chapter. And so at this point I realized that actually I'm really navigating a huge amount of change in my life. We just got married, we found out we were having a baby, we had moved to Hong Kong, and I realized that the changes going on, of course they're going to feel heavy at times. That doesn't mean that they were bad changes. In fact, I think they're very good changes now. When I look at it and I can see where things are going, I feel very grateful, feel very full of joy and purpose. But I really wish that somebody had told me, or even just normalized, that it's natural to feel sad. It's okay to feel a sense of grief at a closing of a chapter of your life that you'll never have again. And yes, of course, in the future, you can still travel, you can still have your own life and still focus on yourself at times as well. But realistically, every single moment of our lives arises and passes away, and we can never get that moment back again. I remember when I was packing up my university accommodation and moving out of uni, moving back to London, I felt really sad, and I always play the same song over and over again at any kind of major transition in my life. It's Time to Say Goodbye by Andrea Bocelli. And so literally every single accommodation that I lived in during my time at Cambridge, when I was moving out of each room, I would play this song on repeat and sing it very operatic style. Time to say goodbye, closing this chapter, moving on to the next academic year, moving on to the next place, the next thing, the next season. And I think in the same way, actually honoring the transition and the change from just being me to then suddenly being someone's mum, and suddenly my body changing in all of these ways, suddenly my emotions changing in all of these ways, suddenly the center of my world also changing, where I focus my energy isn't just on the self or on improving myself, it's also on, okay, this new family that we're growing. I wonder if it's almost scary to talk about this, because not everybody experiences this kind of grief. Some people are just wholly, purely happy about the transition, and it almost seems ungrateful or or rude or nasty or horrible to feel a little bit of sadness. During my pregnancy, I've been reading so many different books about motherhood, pregnancy, birth, being a parent. And so there's this book in particular, literally titled Matrescence by Lucy Jones, which I have really found so profoundly comforting. And it's given me a great sense of solace and also understanding. And reading some of the things that she's written in that book, I'm just like, yes, this is exactly how I'm feeling. And she does actually address very directly this almost guilt feeling of not being 100% purely joyous about the fact that you're pregnant or you're a mum and you have a kid. And how two things can be true at once. You can be extremely happy and over the moon about your baby, and you can also feel some sense of sadness at the passing of your old life. Through the whole pregnancy, I have been navigating this change and doing a lot of journaling and thinking about it. And so I've actually created a guide to navigating change. So whether you're going through some kind of pregnancy or motherhood, or if it's a completely different life change, like a career change or changing what kind of subject you're studying at school, or handling changes in your health or the health of a family member, I've created a completely free guide, which is essentially a step-by-step action and reflection plan for you to understand a bit more about what impact this change is having on you, honoring the chapter that is closing or winding down, and working towards dynamic acceptance and embracing of the new season. So if you're interested, you can check that out down below. Again, completely free. I just made it purely in case anyone else out there is navigating a big life change of some kind. I found these exercises particularly helpful and supportive for me. My relationship with productivity and purpose has shifted, and it's something that I'm still actually negotiating with over time. But essentially, I've realized that productivity doesn't have to look like getting things done and ticking off the to-do list. It can also look like taking care of yourself, or taking care of your family, or spending time with a loved one. And for me, a lot of my energy these days has been actually going towards growing our baby. I end up a lot more tired these days. I often can't sleep that well, so then I have fewer productive hours in the day and I'm able to get less done. I get tired more quickly. And they do say that actually being pregnant, especially in the third trimester, is almost like being an actual athlete, where your body is under constant strain. My heart rate, I can literally feel my heart rate has been elevated for majority of the pregnancy. And there's this extra stress on your body where your body is literally keeping another person alive. It's literally acting almost like an intensive care unit machine where it's like incubating and keeping this person alive, literally like supplying through my blood all the nutrients, all the oxygen, taking away all the waste, literally keeping this person alive with my own blood and my own heart, my own body, everything. And initially I didn't feel a sense of purposefulness in this. I think because it felt so abstract to me that I didn't even really realize what was going on. But now that I can really feel our baby kicking, and I've seen a couple of my other mum friends who were also pregnant, but some of them have given birth now, give birth to their babies, and seeing the pictures of their babies, seeing how much love and joy they bring, it's feeling way more real over time. And so I think if I could go back and talk to myself, or if you are going through early pregnancy or feeling not very connected to a sense of purpose or productivity during it, I would say actually give yourself some grace, because it's okay to not feel very connected to your baby. It's okay to not be productive in the ways that you used to be. It's really, really okay to feel guilty, but then it's really, really okay to feel this conflict internally, and also trust that at some point it will all make sense. Another thing I've come to appreciate even more is the value of mothers in society. I think that motherhood is criminally underappreciated in our current society, because actually stepping into the role of the mother, you are inherently often giving up dedicating your energy towards your usual like career or like productivity or self-care, and you're directing it towards growing another human being and taking care of another human being. And I feel like these days there is a lot of emphasis on individual achievement, so whether that's earning more money or getting a promotion in your career. And I think it's wonderful that women women are now able to have their career and support themselves, and it's so important to be able to access that sense of financial freedom so you're never dependent on another person. At the same time, I think it's almost gotten to the point where, especially in a lot of like the liberal feminist girl boss culture, so being a stay-at-home mum is almost seen as a negative thing. And I don't know if this is just me and my interpretation of it, but it seems like it doesn't feel like an aspirational goal. It's not like, wow, you're a mum, like that's so amazing. It's like, oh, I'm just a mum. Like what is that? Like where does that come from? Because actually being a mum is one of the most essential roles in any society, if not like one of the only essential roles in a society. And yet, why do we create these conditions in societal structures around status where we view it as a low status option almost to be a mum, when actually it should be ideally seen as one of the most selfless things that you can do? For example, every woman who goes through pregnancy and carries a baby, brings a baby to life, her body will never ever quite be the same again. And yes, there's all this stuff about, oh, like bouncing back or like trying to take care of yourself afterwards. And I think that's really important to give yourself the time and the space to do that. But realistically, there are things about your body that will never ever be quite the same, which is actually fine. For me, I felt a lot of resistance to this because it's like, oh, I'm sacrificing my body. My body is never going to be quite as like nice or youthful or XYZ as before. But actually, it will bear these subtle marks of having brought to life another human being, which is actually amazing. Why do we not view the mother's body as incredible and beautiful? Why do we view it as like, oh, you gotta like try to get back to how you were before you were pregnant? Why do we have this whole thing? And so I've been asking all these questions and trying to figure out, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we make it so difficult for women to feel like we need to constantly be trying to get back to our pre-pregnancy state, rather than embracing the shape of motherhood, the shape of pregnancy, as beautiful in its own right? I actually think that we as a society need to have a change in attitude towards motherhood, especially with things like fertility rates declining massively across developed countries. It needs to be, I think it even should be, an aspirational thing, something that is supported and celebrated loudly and not seen as like a, oh, you've given up all the freedom that you had, all the career and the success that you had to just be a mum. It's like, no, I don't think it should be viewed as a downgrading of your life. I think it should be viewed as an expanding of your life, an expanding of what you're doing, what you're creating. You're literally creating the next generation of human beings who will be the people who run this earth in a couple of decades' time. Like, what could be more valuable and essential than that? And I think pouring the love and attention and care into raising an amazing next generation of human beings who are kind, smart, wise, insightful, balanced. This is literally the legacy and the next generation of the human race. And so I've just been trying to figure out, okay, what is going on? And so it would be great to hear what you guys think. Am I just going crazy around thinking that there's something weird around how we as a society value and place motherhood in terms of like status and all of that kind of thing? Or is this actually fine? Is this actually how it should be? So coming to the third trimester, the symptoms that I mostly experienced with the third trimester were firstly leg pain. So my calves would feel really sore after standing or walking. And I guess this is just like pooling blood volume in pregnancy increases massively. And also then with like the weight of the belly and everything, I would feel how heavy my belly was after walking. And so like the bit like underneath my belly, like just over here, would feel like actually really tired and painful. And they literally have these like straps that you can use to like strap up your belly, almost like some kind of bra or like a supportive garment for your belly. And I can finally see why some people will use them. I've not actually tried one yet, but I sometimes find myself just holding up my belly just with my arms to relieve some of this weight of this belly, I guess, on my lower abdominal muscles. The major thing that really has impacted me in this third trimester is insomnia. And I feel like I have the sleep cycle literally of a baby now, where I go to sleep, I can fall asleep initially, but then I wake up after about 3 hours and I'm so alert and I can't go back to sleep for about 2 or 3 more hours. And then I'll go to sleep again and then again sleep for about 3 hours, like 2 or 3 hours, and then wake up again. And so it means that usually in a night's sleep where I give myself, let's say, a 9-hour sleep window, I'll usually get about 8 hours sleep. Now I will get maybe about 5 to 6 hours sleep. And I'm an 8 hours sleep kind of girl. Like, I need my sleep to function well, to feel good, my mental fitness, my productivity, feeling healthy, like my skin, everything. Even just being able to meditate and exercise, I usually need a baseline of reasonable sleep to be able to really engage with those things. And so then suddenly being in this place where every single night I'm getting like 5 hours sleep, something like that, I just became chronically sleep deprived, which was actually quite depressing in its own way. And so at least, unlike the first trimester, I wasn't throwing up all the time, but suddenly I was just feeling a bit depressed because I was like, I'm exhausted. I'm living in a haze right now of exhaustion. The way that I've gotten around this is I've just embraced it. So initially I tried to resist it, and I would try to make myself fall asleep in the night and try all sorts of things. So I'd try and eat a banana, sometimes that would help. I would try to just like get up or do some stretches, or I'd just lay there reading my Kindle, or I'd like try to play a meditation or some relaxing music or use some scent sprays. None of it really helped, if I'm honest. So what I've done now is I've just decided to embrace it. So I sleep, have my like initial 2.5, 3 hours sleep, wake up, maybe I'll kind of get up, do even some work, or I'll do some journaling or do some yoga or read some pregnancy books. Then I'll go to sleep again for another 2 or 3 hours, then wake up, start the day. And then in the afternoon, I have a nap now. So I have a nap block of about an hour and a half. So like about one sleep cycle. So I give myself maybe a 2 hours nap block in the afternoon where I'm like, okay, you know what? Overnight, I am not able to sleep all the way through. I am waking up in the middle. And so therefore I'll give myself a little nap block. And so now I have like 3 sections of sleep through the night. So I've basically become polyphasic, a little bit like a baby. And I'm not sure if there's something around like the hormone change or something to that effect, meaning that my body is preparing for nursing and preparing to actually have a baby and to get in sync with the baby's sleep schedule. I don't know if it's something to do with that. It seems to be some kind of hormonal changes in the 3rd trimester, and also the discomfort of having a big belly and a kicking baby in there, and also less deep sleep. Something to that effect. Another thing in the 3rd trimester is my belly is now very big. And it comes up to like here. I can feel the baby kicking. And so all of my other organs have kind of been squished out of the way, I guess, including my stomach. And so I've been able to eat much less volume of food, which I've actually found maybe has restricted my weight gain slightly, because I've plateaued in terms of my weight gain in pregnancy at a healthy level still. So I'm not concerned by the weight gain. The volume of food that I can eat in one sitting is maybe like a third of what I used to be able to eat. I used to really be able to properly tuck into even like 1 meal a day. I tried that kind of fasting schedule once, and I could eat like massive volume of food. No chance now, because if I eat too much, I start to feel a little sick, I start to feel a little heartburn, I start to feel like, oh, uncomfortable, and I'm not hungry anymore because my stomach is actually squeezed and full. It's almost like having like gastric band surgery, almost, where they like reduce the size of your stomach so then it feels full more quickly and then you eat less. So that's been interesting to observe. It's not really affected my life too much. I just eat small, frequent meals now, and it kind of works with my insomnia routine. I call it my insomnia routine, like that period in the middle of the night where I wake up, because I eat dinner, I sleep for a little while, I have my insomnia routine, eat a banana or have some food during that time, and then continue. And so it's all kind of slotting into this very strange higgledy-piggledy routine. One of the things I'll often do during my insomnia routine, and actually is how I initially came up with the idea for just doing this reflective kind of video, is I use an app called VoicePal, which is an app that I've been involved in building actually, which essentially allows you to hit record on your phone and then just start talking about ideas. And it's very good for helping to develop and curate a set of your ideas and just get them out and get the ideas flowing. Because then once you've talked a little bit about the seed of the idea, then VoicePal will ask you follow-up questions and prompt you to think more deeply by essentially using AI to transcribe and then understand what you've said, what your idea is, and then suggest ways that you can deepen these ideas. So I really like to use this for thinking of ideas and developing stuff for either this channel or my newsletter. Feel free to check out my newsletter if you're interested. It's called Letters to My Younger Self, where I write about personal growth tips and journaling prompts that I wish that I could give to my younger self. So while in the first trimester I had massive hits to my energy and I was nauseous, vomiting, but still like I didn't find that my actual routine had changed too much. It was more just that I was sort of crippled. Second trimester, everything felt pretty normal for a little while, except the belly started to pop out and I could start to feel the baby kicking, which was very cute. And now third trimester, it's like my routine has sort of been turned on its head a little bit, where now I'm polyphasic. I sleep for like 3 little small sections in the day. I eat tiny meals and like tiny snacks of like fruit and whatnot throughout the day to get enough calories. So it's been a good series of different seasons. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in pregnancy pregnancy is this concept of surrender and going with the flow, because firstly the pregnancy happened sooner than we thought it would, and so that was already an exercise in actually surrendering to the flow of what was unfolding and embracing it as much as possible. And then also all of these sudden physical, emotional, spiritual changes, somehow resisting them and feeling frustrated by them actually makes the suffering of them worse. And by fully embracing it, I found that even if I'm not sleeping well, or even if my belly is sore, I can at least embrace that to an extent. I remember one experience that really crystallized out how emotional I was actually watching Wicked. When Wicked had just come out, Ali and I went on a cinema date. We went to watch Wicked, and I remember literally sobbing out loud. And literally my body would heave. I'd be like sobbing different bits of Wicked in kind of a positive way, because I was finding it so beautiful, so moving and meaningful. But I've literally never sobbed like that in my entire life in the cinema. And even though Wicked isn't the most emotional film I've ever watched in the cinema, so sometimes I'll just cry silently in the cinema, but never really sob out loud. And I was like, oh, okay, I kind of feel bad for the people around me. At least it was quite loud in there anyway with the cinema sound system. So hopefully they didn't hear too much sobbing. And then even the way that I feel about my pregnant body changes so much. So sometimes I'll feel very cute. I'll feel, oh, I'm so cute and round. I'm enjoying this season of being very round and cute. And sometimes I'll feel like, oh, what is life? I'm so heavy, everything's so painful, my belly is being ripped open from the inside, this feels so bad. When actually the physical situation hasn't really changed. It's all kind of the same. It's all just what perspective I'm taking on it. Another example is because my tummy has been stretched out, including my abdominal muscles now, I can't really sit up in the same way. My core muscles don't quite work the same. And so sometimes when I'm laying in bed or trying to get up, I'm almost stuck like a little beetle on my back in this second and third trimester especially. And I'll be kind of flailing around trying to get up and have to roll over and push myself up with my hands, that kind of thing. And so sometimes I find this quite funny. Sometimes I'm it's kind of entertaining to be a little beetle stranded on my back and have to roll over and that kind of thing. And sometimes I'm despairing, oh my god, what is life? I'm so unable to even move my own body. And so it's everything is filtered through the mind, and this has really amplified my realization of that because I've been so much more emotional. My emotional range during this pregnancy of what I experience on a week-to-week basis is just so much broader. And so again, on this whole motherhood thing, it's very strange that I've almost realized that there's some part of me that has been trained to not value motherhood, that has instead been trained to value personal attainment and achievement and progress, academics, career, all of those things, but not value motherhood, which is really weird, because what could be a greater service to another person than literally growing them from scratch, from a tiny little zygote all the way to being a full human being. And in terms of this whole service and contribution thing, I guess I've been trying to think about this pregnancy in terms of surrender. And in a way, it's almost the universe has presented me with this challenge to embrace this new season of life. And can I really surrender to it and embrace it? Because in a way, actually becoming someone's mum is the ultimate act of service, of contribution, of putting someone else's needs before yours. And if I think about it, if my own mum hadn't carried me for 9-10 months in her belly and then spent years and years and years raising me, taking care of me, I wouldn't be who I am today. And that's true of essentially every single human on this earth, is that if their mum hadn't carried them in their tummy, or if their parents hadn't raised them from when they were tiny up to where they are now, then who would really be around? Because society is literally made up of all of these human beings. Nothing in life is truly permanent. Childhood isn't permanent. Being a baby isn't permanent. I was a baby once. I was a child once. I'm no longer a child or baby. Adolescence, another kind of period of transition, isn't permanent. Being a young woman, free as a bee and no responsibilities, to a baby or her own family, that's a season. That's a rising and passing away. And equally matrescence, this whole transition from A to B, from maiden to mother, this isn't permanent either. And so it's almost this thing of, how can I surrender to this present moment more? How can I be grateful for the experience that I'm having on this earth right now and enjoy the positives and sit there with the negatives? Because ultimately this whole human experience is just that. It's just an experience. We get this opportunity, this chance to experience life on planet Earth as a human being. And so then instead of resisting all of these changes through matrescence, like physical, all of these changes that I've been talking about, how can I instead embrace them fully without hesitation or resistance? Because fundamentally, any resistance or despair just causes more suffering rather than purely stepping into it. In The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle talks about how if there's a situation and you're not sure that you like it, you have a few choices. Either you can do something about it, so take action, or you can choose to completely and fully embrace it with no reservations and accept it fully. And so for this situation, it's like, okay, all of these changes going on in my body, my emotions, my identity, I can either resist this and maybe try to do something about it. But actually, I've kind of decided that this is the right step for me right now. This is the right new season of life that I'm stepping into. And so then how can I actually embrace this without reservation? And I find that my growing belly is almost like a physical metaphor for what's going on in terms of like the center of gravity of my world, where it used to be just me. And I've talked about this in some of my previous videos, where almost this personal development arc initially starts off on the individual level. And it's like, okay, we build ourselves up, we build up our own skills, our academics, our career to a certain point. But at some point that starts to feel hollow. And it's only then where it's like, okay, I've built myself up in order to be able to serve others, to be able to give back, to be able to contribute. And so what is that? And so then almost like this whole center of gravity like shifting, creating this like big belly, which is almost my new center of gravity. And then soon I'll have baby, and it's important for me to maintain a sense of myself still, to take care of myself, to set a great example for her of, okay, what, like, does her mum take care of herself? Does her mum still love herself and still do her exercise, still take care of her health, still work on projects that are really meaningful to her, still do the career things that she wants to do without abandoning herself? But then equally, I want to be a present mum, and I want to expand myself enough to be able to give to myself, but also give to our baby, to our daughter. And so in a way, this pregnancy, I've been growing our baby, and I've also been evolving in myself, where my conception of self has actually changed quite a lot. And I think I went from being very much me-centered to now actually being more ready to step into this role of being someone's mum, and excited for it and feeling joyful and grateful for this new chapter. I'm going to do a whole video about all of the books that I would recommend for anyone who's either pregnant or thinking about being a mum, or already a mum, or a parent, or just wants to understand the whole pregnancy thing a bit more, because I've read like over a dozen books now about pregnancy specifically over the course of this pregnancy. And I've actually had a crazy Kindle streak where I've just been reading so much so often that I think I've gotten up to like 200 days of reading now. In the run-up to the birth of our baby, I've honestly been feeling a mixture of nervousness and also excitement. I think I'm trying to reframe it as excitement, because I don't want to be afraid. I feel like nerves are only going to be unhelpful in the moment. And so I'm trying to see if there are ways that I can invite myself to transmute the nervousness into excitement. After the birth, I'll film some kind of birth update or story with some more reflections around actually being a mum, or like actually having given birth. I hope this has been entertaining or interesting, or maybe even a little bit useful to somebody out there. Again, if you're also navigating some kind of change in your life, you might want to check out this completely free navigating change guide that I've made for you. All in all, pregnancy it's tough. It is really tough. Pregnancy is no joke. It's intense and it's tiring. It also feels worth it. If you enjoyed this video, I think you might like this one over here, where I talk a bit more about my reflections on being a doctor and what that whole experience was like. So it was another kind of rambly, chatty reflections video, which you might be curious to check out.